Tonight, Israel launches airstrikes on Iran as the Middle East crisis escalates. Good evening, I'm Herlyn Kaur. This is ABC News. A major Kuwaiti importer outlines the huge impact Australia's live sheep export ban will have in the Middle East. A global music superstar takes to the stage at a US presidential campaign rally. And Walyalup make the AFLW finals for the first time in 3 seasons. The war in the Middle East has reached another dangerous inflection point, with Israel following through on its threat to attack Iran, launching multiple airstrikes. Iran has played down its success, but the fear remains that this latest action could plunge the region into an even broader conflict. We begin tonight's coverage with Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran in Jerusalem.
When a promise to attack becomes reality. Explosions heard around the Iranian capital.
Several powerful explosions have been heard near Tehran. The origin of the sound is not known yet.
The Israeli Defense Forces soon confirming it had begun its long-awaited strikes.
The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the State of Israel has the right and the duty to respond.
Israel had pledged to respond to Iran's attack on October 1st when more than 180 missiles were fired at Israel. That strike launched in retaliation for the killing of the leader of Hezbollah, Iran's ally in Lebanon. This latest salvo in an increasingly dangerous cycle of attacks, watched closely by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from a bunker in Tel Aviv. Their targets, missile manufacturing facilities and surface-to-air missile defences in the Ilam, Khuzestan and Tehran provinces. After 3 waves of strikes, Israel announced its mission was complete and issued another warning.
If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond.
A threat backed by Washington, a senior White House official telling reporters these strikes should end direct exchanges between the two arch-enemies, but warning of consequences should Tehran respond again.
Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran is on the ground in Israel. He joined the White House briefing call.
The United States insists it had no role in this mission. However, it has revealed the Israeli government briefed it on what it was doing, and it has its own intelligence about what was struck and the extent of the damage. The nature of these strikes, targeting military assets as opposed to, say, nuclear facilities, shows that Israel did heed some of the warnings from the United States to limit the scope of these strikes. Indeed, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was here in the last couple of days reiterating that view. But in saying that the US had no direct involvement in this campaign, we do need to point out that Israel continues to be a recipient of significant amounts of US military aid, and we also know that the US has deployed its sophisticated THAAD anti-missile system to Israel in the last couple of days or so, bolstering the country's already advanced air defence systems. This part of the world is on a knife's edge, and it will be up to Iran and how and if it responds, which will dictate whether this situation deteriorates further.
With Israel now trading direct blow with Iran, there are grave questions over what this means for the future of the region. More from Global Affairs editor John Lyons.
Israel is now at war on 7 fronts. The Middle East has never seen this many wars simultaneously. In recent weeks, Israel has bombed Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen and now Iran. Israel's attack was in retaliation for Iran's missile attack on Israel 3 weeks ago, which in turn was in retaliation for Israel's attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria. So will Iran now yet again retaliate? Having recently been to both Iran and Israel, it's clear to me that neither country wants a full-scale war. Israel would probably win, but both sides would suffer enormously. Until now, it's been Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis and Hamas, engaging Israel. It's now a direct war, Iran against Israel. For Iran, the question is, does it want Tehran to end up looking like Gaza? For Israel, the question is, what is its longer-term strategy? Militarily, Israel sees this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to destroy Hamas and Hezbollah. But what is Israel's political strategy? How long can Israel keep bombing its neighbours? After the wars, what will its neighbourhood look like? And is Israel prepared to address the conflict that feeds so many of these other conflicts? Its 57-year-old military occupation of the Palestinians.
Exports of live sheep by ship to the Middle East are winding down ahead of the federal government's commitment to ban the trade by 2028. After 50 years of business with Australia, the downturn is forcing livestock importers in Kuwait to turn to other countries for live sheep, including South Africa.
An average of about 700,000 sheep have been exported live from Australia to the Middle East every year for the past 5 years. But with Australia set to ban live exports in 2028, that number is starting to fall. And that's worrying importers in our biggest export market.
It's very disturbing for us to end the business like that. We don't want to end up with a shortage of protein in this country, and we have to explore our new markets. We open South Africa, but not as efficient as Australia.
The federal government is now offering support for farmers affected by the phase-out of live export, worth almost $140 million. In a statement, the Agriculture Minister, Julie Collins, said $27 million of the package is earmarked to enhance demand within Australia and internationally for Australian sheep products, including in Kuwait. While global demand for boxed meat from Australia is on the rise, the demand in Kuwait is for live sheep.
I'm doing now too from Australia, but the demand is not matching at all because the people they needed it to be fresh.
Although public concern about the treatment of sheep on board export ships has contributed to the decision to ban the trade, industry representatives fear global standards for animal welfare will fall without Australia in the market.
If we take ourselves out of the international market where there is demand for live animals, we are removing ourselves from the impact that we can have internationally on animal welfare.
With live sheep exports from Australia already on the downturn, Kuwaiti importers are now scrambling to find a replacement for live sheep to meet growing demand in the Middle East before the ban comes into force. Sophie Johnson, ABC News.
A Samoan village has put on a show of green and gold to welcome Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on the final day of a major Commonwealth conference. As Pacific police officers joined forces under a new agreement to strengthen security in the region, the PM was granted a special honour. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jejets is in Samoa.
In the Pacific, family ties bring great joy, but hold great responsibility too. The Samoan village of Satapuala adopting Australia for the Commonwealth leaders' meeting. Flush with green and gold and even inflatable kangaroos, the Prime Minister welcomed with open arms. This village bestowing on Anthony Albanese a matai, or chiefly, title.
Can I thank you from the bottom of my heart for this extraordinarily generous welcome.
The Prime Minister also celebrating a strategic victory. Leaders and foreign ministers from 8 Pacific countries joining Australia and New Zealand to mark the first deployment of a new police group drawn from 11 nations, helping to provide security in times of need and for major events like this one.
In sharing experience and information and in addressing security concerns together.
The Pacific family needs to provide security for the Pacific by the Pacific.
When Anthony Albanese talks about the Pacific family providing its own security, the subtext is clear. Australia's uneasy about China's attempts to strike more policing and security agreements across the region. Initiatives like this are about boosting local capability, but they are also, at least in part, about locking China out as a security player in the region. Pacific solidarity, that's also strategic. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Apia.
It's still a close race in the Queensland election 3 hours into the count. The ABC's chief election analyst Anthony Green says the LNP can reach a majority. The Labor government was seeking a fourth term, while the LNP hopes to win office for the first time since the Newman era. Earlier today, the two leaders made their final pitches.
A quintessential Queensland institution, democracy on display.
Can't change your mind.
A glowing review of the Premier's 10 months in charge, albeit a biased one.
A privilege, I think, and an honour to watch the person I love, my favourite person in the world, do his best for Queenslanders. It's been wonderful.
Here's to a fresh start for Queensland. David Crisafulli, how are you?
Opposition leader David Crisafulli started his day in the only Gold Coast Labor-held seat of Gavin.
If we get the chance, I'd like the opportunity in 4 years' time to earn your trust.
Well, we'll see. I'll see what you do and really hope that you don't stuff it up if you get in.
The LNP needs a dozen seats to take government for the first time since 2015. Several Brisbane Labor seats like Cooper here in Ashgrove are under threat from a strong Greens outfit. The government's challenge is appealing to voters here in the capital while retaining regional seats at risk of flipping to the LNP and Katters.
I think it's time for change.
I like the fact that there was $1,000 off my electricity bill.
Change needs to happen, and that's why people are going for the smaller parties like One Nation and the Katter Party.
I voted for, to keep Stephen Miles in. He's, especially after the Cyclones up here last year, he was fantastic.
Bundaberg is Queensland's most marginal seat, held by Labor's Tom Smith by just 9 votes.
I think I changed on to the LNP. Maybe they might do something.
Potential kingmaker Robbie Katter from Katter's Australian Party has threatened legal action over signage.
I've messaged Dave Crisafulli to tell him that he knows that's a lie and take it down, give him the option they've chosen not to.
Serious allegations also made in the marginal LNP seat of Currumbin.
There's been intimidation, there's been all sorts of things, and it's something that, I'm probably going to sit down and write about it.
Almost 2 million Queenslanders cast their ballot early. Alex Brewster, ABC News, Brisbane.
Beyoncé has appeared with Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, taking the stage in Texas with the Democratic US presidential candidate. Donald Trump was also in the Lone Star State, 11 days out from the election.
Queen Bee back in her home state to lend a helping hand to the Democratic presidential candidate.
I'm not here as a celebrity. I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as a mother.
Texas is seen as a safe Republican state, but Kamala Harris came here because it has a near total ban on abortions, and that's a key campaign issue for the Democrats.
You who are ground zero in the fight for reproductive freedom.
Donald Trump was also in the southern state, trying out his new catchphrase on illegal immigration.
We're like a garbage can. We're like a garbage can. First time I said it was last night.
Make sure y'all get on the boat. Local star power being deployed in Atlanta, Georgia too. A rapper and a former NFL quarterback among those touring a notoriously crime-ridden and run-down housing estate, encouraging people to get out and vote.
If you want change, complaining is not going to work. So instead of complaining, this is your way to be heard.
The goal here is to encourage and ignite our communities, especially the communities that are often forgotten about.
I might, because she told me to.
Can you tell us who you're going to vote for?
It ain't going to be Trump.
2.5 million people in Georgia alone have already voted. This time around, both campaigns are encouraging their supporters to vote early. And one of the reasons is that allows them to get a lot of information on which demographics are casting ballots, allowing them to fine-tune who they still need to reach out to.
Georgian residents over the age of 65 have been particularly enthusiastic about early voting, so that's potentially a positive for the Trump campaign. Potential positive sign for the Harris campaign is women voters have really been taking up early voting as well.
As a race without a clear front-runner nears the finishing line. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Atlanta, Georgia.
An online predator has been jailed for life after being convicted of the manslaughter of a young victim who took her own life. Alexander McCartney from Northern Ireland posed as a teenage girl online, carrying out catfishing attacks on around 3,500 female victims. His victims were found in 30 countries, including Australia. The 26-year-old will spend at least 20 years in prison after a 12-year-old American girl took her own life during an online chat with McCartney, who demanded sex acts.
His offending was on an industrial scale. He had a number of devices and was operating across different time zones. His depravity knew no bounds.
Here in Australia, the coalition is pushing to build 7 nuclear power plants around the country, but in Taiwan, they're working to phase out their own nuclear energy grid. The island's last reactor is due to be decommissioned next year amid fears of earthquakes and safe waste disposal. East Asia correspondent Kathleen Calderwood reports from southwestern Taiwan.
Lanyu, or Orchid Island, has been home to the indigenous Dao people for thousands of years.
This is the field I inherited from my parents.
Shaman Umrush and this island have been at the heart of Taiwan's nuclear debate since the 80s, when the government built a nuclear waste site here. As the local school principal, Shaman Umrush maintains the rage.
Once we learned that it was nuclear waste, we started protesting. It has been nearly 40 years now.
The waste stored here is low level, but investigations have found it's been badly managed, potentially exposing workers to high levels of radiation.
If the nuclear waste stays in Lanyu, it will continue to impact the environment.
But the electricity company Taipower says radiation around the dump is within safe limits.
The ABC came here more than a decade ago in the years following the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan, as fears about nuclear grew here in Taiwan. Since then, a new government has decided to phase out all nuclear power. Even so, the local fight about the nuclear waste dump here remains.
But getting rid of nuclear energy creates a completely different set of problems.
To take all that power you expected off the grid, it's left everything just really, really tight.
In the past 4 years, there have been 3 major blackouts across Taiwan.
Energy transition is a must, but we can't rush suspending the last nuclear power plant.
Meanwhile, the electricity company Taipower is still figuring out what to do with Taiwan's nuclear waste. It says it will decide on a permanent storage location by 2038. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Lanyu, Taiwan.
Members of a remote Indigenous community have travelled across the world to bring back dozens of sacred items sold to a German researcher more than 50 years ago. Stone knives, shields and spear throwers are among the pieces being returned to representatives of the Walpiri community of Yuendamu at a ceremony in Frankfurt. Reporters Anisha Pilarossetti and Michelle Rimmer have this special report.
In Australia's Red Centre, the remote town of Yuendamu is 300 kilometres north of Alice Springs. 50 years ago, a German researcher visited the community to capture Walpiri culture on film and left with dozens of sacred items and cultural objects.
It don't belong to everyone. It don't belong to anyone from that side of the place, of the community.
Half a century later, Jamie Hampton from the Walpiri Project tracked the missing items to Frankfurt.
Hey, is this Bernhoff speaking? Yes, this is Jamie.
The late German researcher's son, who joined him on a visit to Yuendamu, had them in his personal collection.
Burnoff remembers a lot of those conversations his father had with those elders. And because of that, he'd always, wanted to eventually give these objects back to the community.
That time has now come.
It's been, a long journey for the Wallbridge project, and it's good that we're gonna bring our ancestors' objects back.
We're doing it for our children, like our elders have done it for our generation.
Now a team from the Wallbridge community are making the 14,000-kilometre journey to Germany to bring the sacred objects back home.
Half a world away, here at Frankfurt's Senckenberg Museum, the long journey home for these sacred objects begins.
The collection includes stone knives, spear throwers and shields.
It's mixed emotions from being excited, emotional, feeling complete. They're not just objects. To us, they're part of our ancestors, part of our DNA.
The community will also be given around 7 hours of video footage filmed in Yuendamu in the 1970s.
They mean much more to them than they do for me. When they reconnected to the objects, it was no question this had to be done. And I'm happy we did it.
For the Wallbridge community, these items don't just unlock a piece of history, they offer the opportunity for future generations to connect with their culture.
It's not just with us as men, it's women, it's young people that are now saying, hey, we've got to do more of this.
The objects will be temporarily stored at the South Australian Museum until a cultural centre in Yuendamu is finished. Once there, their journey home will be complete.
To sport, Wallyalup's AFLW final spot is locked in with a 30-point win over GWS. Last night, ladder leaders North Melbourne beat Adelaide by 8 points, continuing their unbeaten run with one match of the regular season remaining, while Port Adelaide, known as Yarrapulti, secured their 5th win in a row.
In the midst of their best season yet, it's a moment worth capturing. Port bringing the power and getting crafty.
Dowrick goes off the ground and that skittles through.
The Power dominating from the outset, kicking a 5-2 second half and running over the Suns, who couldn't make the most of their chances. Only adding to their pain, Gold Coast defender Daisy Darcy subbed out in game 50 and sent for scans.
Seems to be holding onto that right knee.
Oh no.
At the minute.
Fremantle has been perfect on the road this season, and today no different, running out 30-point winners over the Giants.
Kaufman with a look at the goals.
The Dockers will return home with their place in finals locked in, thanks to their brilliant Irish duo, Aisling McCarthy's 3 goals, her best output this season.
McCarthy's been the player of the game, and she might kick the goal of the game as well. What a start is Ash McCarthy.
Ola Lally playing the perfect support.
Stole it and kicked the goal. A second brilliant goal from Ola Lally.
The Kangaroos made a statement in Adelaide with an 8-point win over the Crows.
North Melbourne remain undefeated and are 1 step away from their first point of premiership.
Roos star Jasmine Garner again a class above the rest, finishing with 27 touches and 2 goals.
Garner found her boot and found a goal.
I'll look back in a number of years' time and just say that I was extremely lucky to coach, probably one of the best, if not the best player.
After kicking 9 behinds for the match, Adelaide will be rueing its inaccuracy, with its hopes for a top 4 finish taking a hit. Alexia Pesce, ABC News.
Woolwich Marawa's slim AFLW finals hopes have been dashed after the Eagles slumped to their 4th straight defeat, losing to Geelong by 33 points at Lathlane. Ella Roberts was again the most influential player for the home side, collecting 33 touches and a goal, but it was Irish import Aisling Maloney who stole the show, kicking a club record 6 goals for the Cats and dominating the Eagles' defenders. The loss leaves Woolwich Marawa in 12th place on the ladder, ahead of the final game of the next season next week against Sydney. The Perth Wildcats have continued their up and down NBL season with a 3-point win over the Sydney Kings at Perth Arena last night. The Cats went into the game without star Bryce Cotton, who's recovering from a rib injury, but a dominant performance from Keanu Pinder helped cover the four-time MVP's absence. Pinder collected 34 points and 3 offensive rebounds in the 87-84 victory. The result improved Perth's season record to 3 wins and 4 losses. Jockey James McDonald has made history, becoming just the 3rd rider to win 3 straight Cox Plates after a dominant victory in the Weight for Age Championship today. The favourite heading into the race, Prognosis, ran in 2nd, while the James Cummings-trained Broadsiding claimed 3rd in a photo finish.
Storming to victory.
She's 4, 5 lengths in front.
James McDonald's 3rd Cox Plate, a win for the ages. The 7-year-old guiding McDonald to his 100th Group 1 victory.
She won like winks. Yeah, it's just a phenomenal performance.
When you buy these horses, you hope. Not in your wildest dreams do you think you're going to win a Cox Plate.
A scare at track work earlier in the week cast doubt over the mare's health heading into the race.
The Cox Plate's on every year. If she didn't make it, who cares? She's alive and James is alive. Yeah.
Conditions at Moonee Valley were ideal.
Look at the day. I mean, unbelievable. Could it be better than this?
And a familiar tune signalled the countdown to the race of the day.
Racing in the Cox Plate.
The field of 9 soon had a front runner. Kieran Maher trained Pride of Jenny out in front for much of the 2,040-metre race.
Pride of Jenny is the leader in the Cox Plate.
But with the finishing post in sight, McDonald made his move.
But Via Sistina now pushes the button on the outside and goes up and takes the lead.
Race favourite Prognosis falling behind as the champion mare left all in her wake.
Via Sistina storms away with 150 to go.
A record equalling win by 8 lengths. One for the history books. Erin Marsicovetere, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Matildas' new era has begun with a 1-1 draw against Switzerland in Zurich. Australia went into the break with the lead after Caitlin Ford was fouled, allowing her to convert from the penalty spot. But the goal was cancelled out by Geraldine Reuteler's second-half strike as interim coach Tom Samani. First game ended in a stalemate. Now for a look at the weather, and Perth's minimum today fell to 13.1 degrees around 6 a.m, rising to a top of 22.5 degrees just before 1 p.m. Right now in the city it's 18 degrees and the humidity is 60%. The state's coolest spot was Collie today, which recorded a minimum of 5 degrees, while in the north, Port Hedland and Roebourne Airport rose to a maximum of 45 degrees. On the satellite, there's been patches of low to mid-level cloud with embedded thunderstorms thanks to a surface trough. Some onshore flow was also seen, bringing some low-level cloud to the south. A high-pressure centre is moving into the Bight tomorrow with a deepening trough down the west coast, which will bring the heat next week, with temperatures in the mid to high 30s possible for Perth. Around the country, a shower or two in Brisbane, 26, partly cloudy in Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. Hobart's expecting some showers, 21. Sunny in Adelaide, and Darwin is expecting a shower or two, 34 degrees. Back to WA, and in the north there are showers and gusty thunderstorms possible over most parts of the Kimberley and the far eastern Pilbara, as well as for the northern and central parts of the interior. It'll be sunny across the Goldfields and Central West tomorrow, 30 in Geraldton, 27 in Norseman and Coolgardie. There's a possible light morning shower about the southern coastal parts of the southwestern corner, cloudy and 19 in Augusta, sunny and 24 in Bunbury, but much warmer through the Great Southern, 28 for Corrigan. And it'll be a sunny day in Perth tomorrow, reaching a top of 28 degrees from a low of 13 overnight. Sunrise will be at 5:24, setting at 6:38. And looking ahead, it's getting warmer by the day with a top of 32 degrees for Monday, 35 on Tuesday, reaching a hot 36 for Thursday, with a much warmer nighttime temperatures across that week in the high teens before it starts to cool down with tops in the 20s by Friday next week. And that's ABC News for now. Charlotte Hamlin will be back with you tomorrow. In the meantime, you can stay up to date with ABC News online or catch the news anytime on ABC iView. I'm Herlyn Kaur. Have a good night.